We are back! Generation Exceptional, the podcast, is back. And I'm here with a brand new video podcast version of the Generation Exceptional podcast. Now, if you're brand new here, well, you probably don't even know that we ever went away. But if you followed this podcast, say, a year or so ago, you might have wondered what happened to it, because I decided in, I think, March, April last year, to, shall we just say, resign Generation Exceptional to the podcast heaven. Although I kept all of the old episodes alive on things like Spotify and Apple and all of those great places. But I made the decision to wind it up, and I'm going to share in this podcast why I did that and why I'm reviving it right now. So hi, if you're not familiar with me, my name's Bev Thorogood. I am a coach and a business mentor, and I basically work with coaches and wellness practitioners to help them make that transition from private practice, one-to-one clients, B2C, whatever you want to call it, into the B2B or corporate world, because fundamentally I think that's probably one of the best ways to generate a more steady stream of good income as a wellness coach. But let me talk about Generation Exceptional, because let's just say it's been playing in the back of my mind for some time now whether to revitalize the podcast or not. So for those of you who aren't familiar with me, about 6 and a bit years ago, I left a very long career with the MOD in the UK, working predominantly for the Royal Air Force, to start my own business. I kind of left, and I wouldn't say I left under a cloud, in as much as I didn't leave with any ill feeling or anything with my colleagues, quite the opposite. But I did leave because I was struggling a huge amount with perimenopause and perimenopausal symptoms, and what I now realise was undiagnosed ADHD. I was diagnosed with ADHD just over a year ago. So all of that was kind of considered. I really felt like I was losing the plot. I don't know if any of you will relate to that. And I ended up walking away from a 32-year career in March 2018. And I started up a business without any idea how to run a business or anything like that. And I quite quickly started to make my mark in the menopause awareness training space for workplaces. So basically I was going into businesses and helping to raise awareness of the impact of menopause on working people. And I did that for 5 years successfully through the big C and the pandemic. But I would say by where are we now? So probably by November, December 2022, I was pretty burned out. I was working hard. I had lots and lots of really great clients. I had a very small team, an outsourced team, and I was bringing in external trainers to do some associate work for me, and it was all great, but I was knackered, if I'm honest, and I kind of lost the love for what I was doing. I still felt really passionately that menopause in the workplace and that awareness was really important. I just felt like it wasn't my place to be delivering that anymore. I felt like it was time to hand over the baton to women who were coming through and still had that kind of, I call it the fire in their belly, because it was impacting them. By this time I was nearly 56. I was kind of through the whole menopause transition, although it had probably been going on for about 10 or 12 years. So I felt it was time to move on. But it took me until March 2023 to really make the decision that I wanted to do something different. I was diagnosed with ADHD in January 2023, and I think going through that diagnosis, trying to come to terms with what that meant, all kind of played into me making the decision to pivot my business and to basically change direction from working with corporate businesses in the menopause space to doing something that was really completely different, in as much as, well, let's just say I went through quite a few different iterations before I figured out what I wanted to do, which I think is often the case. Certainly for me with my ADHD, I tend to act quite impulsively on things. So when I made the decision to change direction of my business, I didn't go, okay, I'm gonna phase this one out and phase this one in. I kind of decided to just burn the boats. I read a book called Burn the Boats. I can't remember who it's by, but I read this book, I was listening to it actually on Blinkist in the car, so it was like a pre-seed version of the book, and basically it was set on the premise that, I can't remember which explorer it was. I always want to say it was Julius Caesar, but I don't think it was. I don't think it was the Romans. I think it was somewhere else. But basically some explorer took his army to a new island country, knew they were going to be defeated if they didn't really fight, and he basically ordered his troops to burn the boats, so they had no retreat. And that's what I did in my business. I just burnt the boats, messaged all my customers, said, right, I'm not going to be doing this anymore, thank you for your custom, I'm going to be doing something else. And that was it. I made that decision, and it's pretty much indicative of me and the way I've lived my life, to be fair. But once I'd made that decision, I suddenly kind of thought, well, I'm not sure really what I want to do. And I've been through quite a few iterations, which I'll talk about in a second. But along with that, I felt Generation Exceptional had to be burned, if you like, with the boats of the business. So I haven't really recorded any Generation Exceptional podcasts, well, for over a year. I have, however, had 2 other podcasts that I've started and not really committed to. The first one was called the Adapt podcast. It was aimed at female entrepreneurs with ADHD, because I'd just had my diagnosis and I thought, that's what I want to do. I want to help women with ADHD. So I started the Adapt podcast. I started a Facebook group called Adapt, all designed to support women, female entrepreneurs with ADHD. And then I realised pretty quickly that actually I didn't want to be doing that. I didn't want to be working in the ADHD space. I'm very happy to talk about my ADHD, and I probably think about the way I work in a very ADHD friendly way, but I didn't want to be an ADHD coach. I didn't want ADHD to be the mainstay of my business. So after not many episodes of the Adapt podcast, that one kind of got ditched. And then I started another podcast called Real Talk with Bev Thorogood, because that's original, isn't it? But again, I'm not sure really what it's meant to be doing. I don't really know who the audience is. So that one kind of died a death. Well, it didn't. It got a rebrand, and I rebranded it as the Working with Corporates podcast. And I started to record a few episodes, but my heart wasn't really in it. And despite the fact that my business now is all about working with corporates, basically the direction of my business was to move towards helping wellness professionals and coaches to do what I'd done, which was to get in front of corporate audiences. And that's the mainstay of my business. So it kind of made sense for the podcast to be that. But it always felt too restricted, too niche. So I didn't think that was something I was going to be able to commit to. If you're going to start a podcast, you really want something that you know you can create lots and lots of content and always enjoy creating the content. And although I love delivering my Working with Corporates project, which is a mastermind, sort of a hybrid mastermind stroke membership, which I'll put a link below if you're interested in finding out more about that. But I absolutely love, delivering the training and the coaching that goes into the membership. But I felt like my podcast, I wanted it to be more expansive than that. I wanted to have the ability to go much broader in the content and be able to invite guests along who maybe had nothing to do with working with corporates. I wanted to be able to talk about ADHD and to talk about entrepreneurship and to talk about being a midlife woman. And I looked at kind of all of the different options. I've gone through a million different name ideas. And I realised that every time I kind of tried to find where I was going with this, it all came back to Generation Exceptional. This was the podcast that I always enjoyed producing. I always enjoyed making. It gave me lots of scope. If you look back over past episodes, you'll see there's a real diverse range of subjects that we talk about. And it just made really good sense, because most of the people that I work with and most of the audience that I have tend to be women of my sort of age or younger. So the Generation X timescale, Gen Xers, I think were born between 1964 and 1986, I think, roughly around there. I know I'm only just a Gen Xer, I'm not a boomer. I was born in 1966, so if you think I'm 58 now, so take off 20 years, that's women from sort of 40 to 60 at the minute. And I thought it just makes sense. It just all fit into place. So I've come full circle back around with the Generation Exceptional podcast. So I'm really, really excited to relaunch this. Now, I know that best practice around a podcast is to give it lots of hype, loads of marketing, have half a dozen episodes in the bag, ready to go before you launch. But I don't really don't play by the rules. So I am just getting out there, and I'm going to start doing some podcast episodes. So this is my launch, I guess. But what I'm really excited about this time round is I'm going to be making it a video podcast. So it'll be on YouTube as a video podcast. It'll also be going out on, all of the usual podcast directories, so Apple, Google, Spotify, etc. At least it will be if I can get it up and running. Let's watch this space. I've been having a bit of trouble with pushing the RSS feeds out to some of the other directories. We will get there. It's just a hiccup. I will get it sorted. So chances are you're probably watching this. If you're watching it, if you're watching it, you'll be on YouTube. So welcome to YouTube, and if you're about, I'd love you to subscribe, because I'm really trying to grow my YouTube channel. So that would be absolutely fantastic if you can give it a like and a subscribe. If you're not watching this, you're probably listening to it, and if that's the case, then drop me a comment. I do love to get comments from the people that kind of follow me on my social media, and the podcast is no different to that. So drop me a comment if you're an old timer, shall we say, and you remember Generation Exceptional from the olden days, then say hello. Let me know if you're an old timer or a new timer. So anyway, that is it. That's kind of what I wanted to jump on and just talk to you about this morning. And I think it's really interesting actually how it's come full circle, because I think sometimes you just know when something feels right. And losing the podcast was really the only bit of burning my boats that never really felt quite right. And everything I've tried, every podcast I've tried to create since, just hasn't felt right. I don't know, maybe Generation Exceptional is just close to my heart, because I started Generation Exceptional before I even left my job. It was one of the very, very first things I did before I even started my business. I don't know why. I was just drawn to having a podcast. I had no idea how to do it. I've always edited my own podcast, so if it's not the best editing, come on guys, give me a break. I'm a 58-year-old woman learning these things. I should be getting better at it actually after 6 years, shouldn't I? But I've always edited my own podcast, but it was something that I really wanted to learn how to do. And it was something that I just felt really drawn to. So I'm feeling quite excited about being back and launching the podcast again. So I'm really looking forward to getting some great guests on. I feel as if now I'm a bit braver, and I might just go out and be cheeky and ask for some special guests to come on. Although if you look back, I had some great guests right in the early days. I had Ben Coomer come on, and he was really big in my world when I first started my business, because I was looking at sort of health and nutrition, and he was a big name. He probably still is, to be fair. I also had people like Kate Muir, who was the producer and director of the menopause Channel 4 menopause series with Davina McCall. So I have had some great guests on. But yeah, I'm going to get a bit brave and reach out to some people that maybe I'd have been scared to ask before. So watch this space and let's see who I can get on here. So that's it from me for this very first revamped video podcast for the Generation Exceptional podcast. And I hope you will join me for the next one soon. Take care.